Where will the snow go? It's one of the big questions we'll be tracking as our snow level starts to rise to above 8,000 feet at times. Near Truckee, right around 6,500 feet, we're going to be seeing a lot of rain on top of that snow, and we're going to be breaking down all the elements, concerns, and the dangers that will come with it. The low pressure system that will be bringing this big shift in the weather just now picking up steam in the Pacific. You can see how close to Hawaii it is. A big subtropical connection on this, and that's what's going to bring the warmth and those snow levels fluctuating at times above 8,000 feet, plus excessive rainfall. We're now in the moderate risk throughout most of the valley as well as parts of the foothills. It's going to be a slight risk for parts of the Sierra. And this is really going to be bullnosing right through central California. We just dealt with this December into January, but this storm doesn't look quite as dangerous as that one. And again, we'll explain why. Let's get to some of these watches, though. We've got our flood watch in effect starting off Thursday evening. We'll take that all the way through Sunday morning. The rainfall and runoff will be most prominent below 4,000 feet, and that's going to lead to street flooding, creeks and streams flooding, as well as the potential for some river flooding as well. We've got the numbers on that. Total rain accumulation, and we're talking major impacts here, 2 to 3 inches in the valley and towards the coast. So a lot of the coastal range impacted where we saw some snow all the way down to about 2,500 feet, now getting rain. At Grass Valley, Sonora, also in the foothills, after feet of snow, now it's about 5 to 7.5 inches of rain. So those are two locations that could see some higher impacts from the rain on snow. Plus mud and rock slide risk starts to go up. Not so much for burn scars, and that's because many of the areas that had the wildfires are covered with snow. All right, the snow changes. This is going to be a big part of our story. At about 7,000 to 7,400 feet is where we're going to start it Thursday evening. And it will initially start off low, but that's when we start to see it climbing. It gets up to about 8,000 feet during the day on Friday. That's above the pass level. It starts to fall again Saturday into Sunday to below the passes and right about lake level. That's not to say that we still won't find some pockets of rain in the snow as well. It's going to be a real mixed bag, slushy conditions for our 6,000 to around 7,000 foot level. As far as the total snow accumulation, some of the bigger impacts, Lassen, Carson, and Ebbets passes, as well as Sonora. Many of those, by the way, are closed for the season. About 60 to 80 inches of snow. Chain controls, reduced visibility, and travel delays will bring us into the major impact category with the winter storm warning starting up on Thursday morning. That will last all the way through Sunday morning with wind gusts at about 70 to 80 miles per hour. Major travel impacts. We'll be following those, but it's very possible we could have roadway closures once again. Just breaking it down into sectors here, rain and snow is going to be in the high category, as well as travel and flood, more of the higher impact. Wind will be in there in the moderate range, but the wind could cause some problems. We've got a wind advisory in place Thursday evening through Friday, and that'll be mainly valley gusts from 40 to 50 miles per hour. In the foothills and mountains, wind gusts at 70 plus miles per hour, causing impacts to trees and power concerns as well. Here are the numbers. You can see how when we start to see that main line of rain coming through, the wind also starts to pick up. Roughly about 40 to 50 mile per hour peak wind gusts for the valley, and then that will start to move its way eastward here into the foothills and the Sierra overnight Thursday into early Friday. It's going to be a big overnight wind event for us. As far as the rainfall, we're basically starting off with dry conditions for our Thursday morning, but as the day progresses, that's when we start to see some of those bands of rain picking up, with the heaviest rain coming in during the afternoon. And again, you'll notice here that our snow is still right about 5,000 to 6,500 feet for Thursday. It's not until deeper into the evening that we start to see that snow level climb. The one thing that all emergency officials are saying is please be aware this is not a repeat of 1997 when we had catastrophic flooding. However, ahead of the rain on top of snow and some of the runoff, we just found out that Folsom will be increasing their water releases. This is drone video that was shot earlier today, and you can see that the water level, well, we've got room. We've got capacity to bring in some of that runoff, but we want to make sure that that capacity stays at a safe level. Folsom is one of those reservoirs that is mainly built for flood control. Here's a look at our reservoir conditions right now. And again, we have pretty good capacity to take in the water. We're only at about 60 to 75% of capacity for Shasta, Oroville, and Folsom, but above our historical average for many places. As we move through the Central Valley, New Melones, Don Pedro, San Luis, about 45 to 80% full right now. The problem with the San Joaquin Valley and some of the Central Valley locations is those reservoirs have to allow for releases earlier, just because the channels below that are a little bit tighter. So not a large volume of water can move through in a short period of time. And there is a lot of snow in the Sierra. This is what's got so many people concerned is, oh my goodness, look at those snowbanks. They're, feet up in the air, and now we're putting rain on top of it, and all this is going to melt down. That is not the case. We are well above average, about 150 to 230% of average for this date. Statewide, 192% of average. And the April 1st date, only about 15, 20 days away from when we start to see some of the snow go away and the rain return. We're at 181% of average. And that April 1st date is typically when we start to see a bigger runoff coming in anyway. So we're really about 15 to 20 days away from when we stop seeing a lot of snow in the Sierra. One of the key things that is also alerting people is how dense that snowpack is. It's above the historic line of 82-83 for the southern Sierra. We're still below that historic max for the central and northern Sierra, but any way you slice it, there's a lot of snow up there, regardless if we're at historic highs or not. The other part of this story that is a little bit different than in years past is the snow water equivalent. So let's say we took all that snow, we melted it down. How much water would we get out of it? Well, right now, that snow water equivalent is lower than what we even saw in 2017. So we've got a lot of capacity to hold that water in the cold snowpack, and it will take a lot to actually melt it. It's almost the ideal situation for us because we want that to slowly meter out through the dry part of the year. And right now we've got a good setup to do so. Some of the hazards, though, that are building is when you look at all that snow on top of the rooftops. It's called snow loading when we get rain on top of snow, adding additional weight. Now, this is up at Truckee. We're not necessarily thinking that this is going to be a huge problem up at the Truckee elevation, but lower elevation, say about 5,000 to 4,000 feet and below, where we still have snow on the rooftops, that's where this becomes a really big concern. Because again, we're going to be able to hold the water in some of that snow without a whole lot of melting, but it will add weight. Right now, that's really fluffy snow. The other thing is the snow-covered trees. When we're going to get those winds, not only does that add weight to the trees, which could come down on power lines. As you can see, they're running really close to some of the tree lines here, but that snowpack could actually fall. And if the rain's on top of it, again, denser snow, heavier, could take down the power lines and cause additional power outages. So going over some of the key impacts with these storms, rain on saturated soil will cause easier ponding on roadways and just runoff. Also, snow drifts could block drains. We've been seeing that a lot in the foothills where the snow has basically covered all the storm drains. So now when we get rain, there's really no place for it to go. We already talked about the snow and the snow load, plus the changing snow level, and then also wind on the snow-covered trees and the additional power outages. Those are things that we'll be following closely. We're now moving into an extreme impact for the Sierra, Thursday through Friday. So this is the time frame when we really expect some of the higher impacts to develop in the Sierra, but it's not as far down the hill as what we saw over the past couple of weekends when we had those particularly cold storms. But this is going to be an atmospheric river. It's a warmer storm, significant rainfall in the forecast with a higher snow level, lots of rain, moderate flood risk. Now is the time to prepare for flooding. We've been talking about this. The window of opportunity for this is quickly closing as we start to track the first line of this atmospheric river, which will stay with us all the way through Sunday. We're already hearing about some people that are being asked to potentially evacuate. So fill up or charge a vehicle, charge phones, and sign up for your county's emergency alerts because this will continue to be an accumulating situation. We're going to get the rainfall, and it takes a little while. It's a delayed effect for that water to move its way downstream. Gravity takes it eventually into the valley and then out towards sea. But we've got 8 monitoring situations here, monitoring sites throughout California. that are expected to be above flood stage. And so we'll break it down into a couple of these. First of all, we're going to look at the Tuolumne River at Modesto. You can see the time frame here. It's running in the lower levels, but now it starts to move into the observed level on Friday, peaking during the evening, and then it starts to come down a little bit, but it's going to stay pretty high here through the weekend. Again, accumulated rainfall and runoff. That's why we're seeing it kind of hover right in that flood stage. Mokelumne River at Benson's Ferry, also one that we're going to be watching. That one peaks a little bit later into Saturday, but then stays there through Sunday, and it looks like possibly into Monday as well. And then Cosumnes River at Michigan Bar, we saw a lot of flooding in December and January. And that looks like it's going to be cresting during the afternoon and evening on Friday, and then comes pretty quickly back into monitoring stages. But I will say one thing that we saw with the last round of storms, December into January, when we had a lot of flooding, is those were situations that were constantly changing, just based on outflow and how everything moved through the system. It's a big conveyance system that we have built throughout California, so it becomes especially complicated when we're trying to move large volumes of water through the state. Again, here's the low moving in from the Pacific. This is what's going to be just really ripping through here Thursday into Friday, with the timeline showing the first bands of rain moving on the coast at 8 a.m. The rain intensity picks up throughout the day on Thursday. Snow line goes up on Friday, and then it will come back down on Saturday into Sunday, but it just isn't going to let up a whole lot. If you're planning to travel up into the high country this weekend, just one of those weekends you probably want to delay your travel if you can. I know there's a lot of people that need to get over the hill. If you can do so and find that window of that higher snow line on Friday, it may be the better time to go, because by the time we get into Saturday into Sunday, that's when we really see some of these numbers popping up here, from about 30 to 50 inches of snow. And then for the valley, again, here's a little bit more detail on who's going to be seeing the majority of that rain. And it's about 1 inch to 2 inches straight through the valley over towards the coast. So you're talking coastal hills as well as the Santa Cruz Mountains, really taking a lot of rain coming through and off the hillside. We've got a couple of rivers that are going to be getting close to that flood stage as well across the coast. And then for the foothills, again, we already talked about this, about 4 to 5 inches of rain, and some isolated areas up to about 7.5 inches of rain coming in. Once we open the door for this to come through, as you can see with our timeline right here, we're going to keep this going through next week, and possibly bigger impacts into Southern California. Now, we're likely going to be on the cooler side of temperatures, but likely wetter, and you can see in Central and Southern California. This is going to be something we'll have to watch as well. Where does the jet stream, that subtropical jet, start to move over next week? Because that could alleviate some flood concerns for Northern California, but elevate the flood concerns for Southern California. In the mountains, we'll move from an all-snow event to a mix of rain and snow through early next week. It'll be all rain through the foothills, and then for the coast, rain as well. We're even going to mix in a few thunderstorms in there on Friday and possibly Sunday, so small hail, heavy rain, gusty winds, and that rain, it continues into next week as well.